Hello everyone, so I'm just going to very quickly do a video about David Warner's responsibility and what his penalty should have been. And I'm going to assume that he was guilty of telling Cameron Bancroft that he had to tamper with the ball. So the tampering of the ball that Cameron Bancroft did was quite obvious. He also hid the sandpaper into his hand. So obviously when we're dealing with ball tampering, there is obvious and there is less obvious. So when it's sort of something where, you used a bit of sweat, you thought that was allowed, that's a 1 match ban. But if it's something like sandpaper, which you know is not allowed, it should be 2 matches. And arguably, because he hid it in his hand, it should be 3 matches. So what should the penalty be for someone who tells him he has to do it or else he'll be dropped? Well, it has to arguably be less than that. There's never been a penalty for that ever before. But if we're going to apply the rules of natural justice, you'd probably half it. So David Warner should have faced a 1 to 2 match ban if he was guilty of that. Again, there's been no evidence that he was. There's only been Cameron Bancroft said it and nobody else has supported that. Hasn't been a confession, and in fact Cameron Bancroft has said a lot of things that have been quite contradictory about that. And even though Warner said he's guilty, he didn't want to appeal, doesn't mean he's actually guilty of that. Could be some kind of pressurised confession-ish. He didn't even actually confess. And I think that the argument is that really, certainly on appeal, Warner should be absolved of that. Nonetheless, 1 to 2 matches would have been fair if he was actually guilty of that. Not a year out of the game and not a permanent ban on being captain. He wasn't just a year out of the game from internationals, it was from domestic as well. And so that penalty is far too severe. But let's look at the other bits. What about bringing the game into disrepute? So bringing the game into disrepute is really about lying or manipulating things. And if we look at the lie, there was lying in this and there was manipulation. Number 1 lying was that Cameron Bancroft hid it in his hand very sneakily. Second one was that when the umpires came to him, he produced black felt. Some disguised this case, but he also, I suppose that's really the third, because the second one was when he shoved that sandpaper in his pants. Now, the shoving the sandpaper in his pants arguably maybe was because of coach Darren Lehman with some support from the 12th man Peter Hanscom. They went out, 12th man went out onto the pitch on the orders of Darren Lehman. Now, if they had said to him, hey, shove that down your pants, and hey, lie to the umpires, they would be at least a little bit responsible for it. But they said, all they said was him to say, what the hell, stop that. But they still should have done more. They should have gone to the umpires, but then they say, well, it was all on the screen, they didn't really have anything to add. Anyway, I still think they're a little bit responsible, but certainly not as much as Bancroft. But you add that to the charge, it's all Bancroft. Maybe a bit of Lehman, maybe a tinsy bit of Hanscom, but all Bancroft. And then you have the lying in the press conference where Steve Smith said, it was sticky tape. Now, either Smith did that on his own, bit stupid, or more likely Smith did that because Bancroft told him. Now, I know there's a theoretical that Warner went up to Smith and said, hey Warner, what was it? You're in charge of the ball tampering, what was it? And then Warner said, hey Smithy, no, look, it was only sticky tape. Oh yeah mate, alright, no worries, I'll say it was sticky tape. But there's no way that happened. Smith wouldn't be trusting Warner when he knows that it's Bancroft that did it. So he'd be trusting Bancroft, and whatever Bancroft said, well, he probably said to Smith that it was sticky tape. Smith would have believed him, because Smith would say, well, alright, I'll accept what it is. We'll tell him it was sticky tape. It was sticky tape. And that lie was another level of lying. Now, Smith should be penalised for that because he was silly enough to believe it, but it was Bancroft's lie. So based on that, what should we be getting? Well, we should be getting Smith with a 1 match ban, maybe losing the captaincy as well. Lehman potentially with a 1 match ban, bit of a fine. Maybe Peter Hanscom with a 1 match ban. And Warner, again, if he was responsible, again, there's no proof of that, 1 to 2 match ban. That's it. Now, what about why Warner got banned? And that was, of course, we know that was because Mitchell Starc stood up and said, hey, I don't want to work with Warner anymore. I don't want to be in the same team as him. And if that's the case, well, Starc was guilty of manipulation. And Starc should have faced a 1 to 2 match ban, maybe even longer. And if you actually looked at this in a proper appeal, that's what you'd be looking at. You'd be saying, well, Stark did this. And the people investigating should have known, oh yeah, Stark and Warner have a bit of a fight. We're not going to trust Stark unless we do a bit of collaboration, a little bit of background investigation to see if this one's true. And if they'd done a little bit of that, they would have found that Stark was lying. Stark was just self-preservation because he didn't want to get in trouble and he wanted to throw Warner under the bus. So with that in mind, and considering there was probably a fair bit of coercion about Warner's supposed confession, even though there was no confession, you'd probably eliminate him if any penalty. If you do give him a penalty, if he wasn't coerced, you say him 1 to 2 matches. What he was given was far too severe. What Smith was given was too severe as well. And what Bancroft was given was probably the minimum he should have got. I think he should have got more than that. But considering his behaviour since the ban, I'd say he should be banned for life. And he got off really leniently. But even if you don't ban him for life, you definitely need to begin the healing process by undoing the ban against Warner, and that is essential. That's it from me. Bye bye now.